You have to ask yourself if something fundamental has changed, if the currency was reset, and if the new currency is proving to be more stable than the old one, then perhaps you can consider converting some of your gold and silver.
Hello and welcome, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Warren Buffett recently made some comments about the US dollar that have been getting a lot of attention. Could this lead to a larger understanding of the dangers of currency devaluation by investors? And Florida has recently passed a bill to make gold and silver legal tender. Joining me today to unpack these topics is Oren Elbaz, also known as the Silver Hermit, and Gigi Bullion. Oren is a market analyst, and Gigi Bullion pours fine silver. You can find links to their X and YouTube accounts in the description. Gentlemen, welcome. It's great to have both of you on today.
Hello, good
Good to be here.
evening.
The Florida House has passed a bill to make gold and silver legal tender. This is exciting because Florida has the third largest population in the United States. Their bill establishes that gold and silver coins are legal tender. The bill does require that the gold coins are 99.5% pure or higher, and the silver coins have a purity of 3 nines fine or higher.
Mhm.
The interesting thing is the only bullion accepted, the way that the bill is currently written, is bullion that only has a mint mark or company logo, along with the purity and weight information. So any other bullion would not be eligible based on the rules, the way they've written them right now. What I think is interesting is just using these three 5 ounce bars as an example. This would not count. You could use this one, but I also believe that this basic art on this would disqualify this 5 ounce bar. So it's interesting. The way it's written right now, I also think that it would affect constitutional silver. I don't think constitutional silver would currently count. Based on my understanding of what I read, all of your coins will count as long as they're 3 nines fine or higher, but all of the rounds that have any sort of design on them would not count. So it's just something to keep in mind if folks live in Florida and they're looking to take advantage of that.
Well, it's interesting because the U.S. Constitution, like in Article 1, Section 10, basically says no like individual state can make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payments of debts. So I'm curious if that the way it's worded is so it's like they're making it sounds almost like they're making it sure that's like, oh, you can't use like jewelry.
You know, I kind of have the same impression. This is my general impression is the people that wrote the bill aren't too knowledgeable about what all type of products are available for people to invest in right now. And before November 1st, it wouldn't surprise me if some changes are made to it
Hmm.
that would be more inclusive. Um, but I'll tell you what, either way, it's a huge step in
Oh
the right
yeah,
direction.
because I mean even it's going back to how we should have things like Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5. It's like, gives Congress the power to coin money, blah blah blah. And Section 10, Clause 1, that nothing but gold and silver as a tender for payments of debts or in tender, however it's worded. So it's definitely a good thing because I guess if the federal government, and this comes back to a long-standing thing in the U.S. Between the states and the federal government, that's kind of our whole history to an extent, is that dynamic. But yeah, I think it's a good thing. I think more states should follow suit. I mean, even if it's not the best written law at the time, it's at least bringing us into some kind of standard that's more in line with sound money, which the federal government seems to have both completely abandoned with adopting the Federal Reserve, this like central bank that's like quasi-private, quasi-public, very weird, shady organization. And but yet at the same time, the U.S. Mint is still minting gold and silver coinage. Seems like everything's very confused there. So that's great. The more states that do that, the better. I would love to see that done in Michigan. And I think anybody watching this that lives in the US, like if you agree with that, like call, write your representatives, do all that stuff. I think we need to start pushing our politicians towards towards these ideas.
The thing that's huge is it's reclassifying gold and silver from personal property to money. I was
Mm,
watching a Daniel Diaz interview where he was talking about it, and a point he brought up that I thought was good is, this is really beneficial because businesses or universities can accept gold or silver as payment in the same way they do cash.
mhm,
And then if other states follow suit in a similar manner, this could be great because sometimes states, if they consider it to be collectible or an art, they'll tax it,
mm.
sometimes kind of heavily. Um, so yeah, I think this is a great step in the right direction.
Yeah. And I think this is something as the US dollar inevitably becomes more and more inflated over time is we're going to see more of this, people looking for alternatives. And crypto has been kind of a capital sink with our Federal Reserve System as it is now. Like there's no turning this bus around unless we like actually change everything. So at least on a state level, or I mean even a local level, I mean whatever. But for it to be in statute that yeah, this is money, that's good. I think that's an overall positive thing, and I think we're going to see more of that, more success with things like gold backs and just a broader acceptance of gold and silver coin over time.
But you know what else happened recently? Just on the 5th of this month, Missouri passed a House bill
Hmm.
which amended their Constitutional Money Act. And the really cool thing is this bill now has a clause in it to prevent the state and federal government from confiscating gold and silver in Missouri. So I think that was a power move by Missouri. I could see that making it a lot more attractive to potential investors in Missouri.
I'm an outsider, so I'm not, very familiar with the laws in the United States. But I can say that you're miles away from the position we have here in Israel. Here in Israel, we have nothing. We don't even have this cultural recognition of gold and silver as money or as a means to protect yourself against inflation. So it's not even part of the discussion. So. You can have better bills or worse bills, but even the fact that it's being discussed, even the fact that it's in the spirit of the age, it means that you're in the right direction. It's part of the culture. I can tell you that there are huge parts of the world in which it's not even being discussed.
Hmm.
That does make
Yeah,
me glad to be here
yeah,
in the States.
yeah. There's the United States is a very unique country, and for multiple reasons. Um, Aside from us, like, after World War II, especially, like, essentially taking over the world, well, after the fall of the Soviets and whatnot. But we're like the number one, as far as military power, all of that stuff. So I think a lot of the world kind of follows our lead to an extent, but we definitely have a culture that's distinct than a lot of other countries, whether it's with gold and silver or whether it's with, private firearms ownership. It could be there's many different examples I could use, but I think that steps in the right direction could potentially help it get more into the international conversation with whether it be investors or just people looking to secure their wealth.
Absolutely. We are lucky to be here. And most of our states don't tax gold and silver when we're buying it. So we're very lucky. Recently, Warren Buffett, the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, said that the fiscal policy of the United States scares him and that the US dollar is basically going to hell. He expressed concern that the rate of devaluation of fiat currencies and noted that it's hard to build checks and balances to the system to keep this from happening. It's been reported that Berkshire Hathaway has a cash position of about $334.2 billion, which makes me wonder what his next move is. After hearing about his latest comments, I think he's probably going to exit this large cash position soon. What do you guys think about Warren Buffett's recent comments?
I think a lot of people do follow Buffett for investment advice or like looking for a way or whatever. And, you know, he has a decent amount of capital. So I think it's a good thing overall. And I think it makes sense as, I think what you had mentioned there, I don't know if that was an exact verbatim quote, but that, it's something, the dollar's going to hell. And yeah, it is. And that's by design, of how the system's set up. So I don't see it stopping, which is, I think, more like I kind of mentioned earlier. I think there's going to be more going into physical commodities like gold and silver.
I think it's a huge thing that someone like Warren Buffett is addressing the fact that there are huge deficits and that the U.S. dollar is in danger, of collapsing. Because there were times in which, even suggesting that idea was, it immediately puts you in the spot of the conspiracy theorist or the madman. And for years and years, we were the only ones talking about this possibility, and suddenly we're getting some mainstream recognition. Now, Warren Buffett is not the first person from within the system to acknowledge these problems. I think Ray Dalio of Bridgewater was the first one to come out. I think 3 years ago, and started talking about the danger of high inflation, and also social strife. And you've had people like Jeremy Grantham also talking about a huge bubble in the stock market. But Warren Buffett is a person that people listen to. He has many followers. And if he is concerned about the future of the dollar, now that is a big thing. That's a sea change. I think it has to do with the fact that Trump is in power, because, of course, Warren Buffett is not a big fan of Donald Trump, and he must be feeling frustrated due to these tariff policies, which he probably does not agree to. When your guy is not in power, then you feel more free to criticize government policies, I think. But also, I think the rising price of gold is really starting to affect people's thinking, and people are watching the way the stock market has been behaving since the beginning of the year, and comparing it to the price of gold, and seeing that it would have been far better off in gold than in stocks, and perhaps it's starting to affect the mainstream view.
I've heard more people kind of talking about gold, in general with what's the price with what the price has been doing. But I've also heard people that are mainly into gold. Now starting to talk about silver because they're like, okay, well, I'm starting to see like silver is way undervalued. Maybe I should move some of my capital into silver where they were only getting gold before. So I think that might be something coming down the road as well. More people paying more attention to silver as well.
I think it's just a matter of time until people start paying more attention to silver. And if they really think about what Warren Buffett was talking about, he was talking about the dangers of fiat currency. A lot of people might be concerned about what's going on with the tariffs right now, and they might start thinking about worst case scenarios in regards to hyperinflation, and currency devaluation. You know what's interesting about the hyperinflation that they had experienced in Weimar Germany is that it happened in the modern era to a Western nation. So this is something that we can look at that's somewhat comparable to our country today.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Warren Buffett's remarks, also the price action we're seeing in gold, has sent me, to look once again at what happened in Weimar Germany during the 1920s, and to try and learn some lessons from what they experienced back then. And when you start digging, you always find out some new, interesting details because, of course, this hyperinflation which happened in Germany, it's like the classic case because we always talk about because it's well documented, it's relatively in the modern era. So, it's not as though we can pretend that hyperinflation happens only in third world countries because we have this example of Germany. So, in order to explain what exactly happened there, we need to give some background. So, of course, as we recall, this hyperinflation took place right after World War One. So how did it come to be? Well, during World War One, Germany suspended its gold standard, like many other Western nations. Germany was on a gold standard, and they had paper marks which circulated alongside gold marks. And before the war, they were, had a 1-to-1 ratio. And so that they can deficit spend during the war, they suspended that gold standard. And of course, they spent a lot of money because they chose, instead of raising taxes, they chose to fund the war through issuing debt. So the value of those paper marks should have dropped quite a lot. But what we've seen is that during the war, people hoarded the cash. People didn't spend the cash. So inflation was latent. It was as though hidden. And that kind of reminds me of what we've seen here. I think between 2009 and let's say 2020. If you think about it, there was a lot of money printing taking place back then, but somehow it didn't flow into the commodity market. So we didn't feel the inflation. It was there, but it was hidden. It was latent. And, I'm afraid that after 2020, suddenly all that money is unleashed, it's starting to bid up the prices of commodities. So we're starting to feel the inflation.
Yeah.
Right?
And yeah, that leads to a feedback loop of people uh for lack of better terms, feeling that pressure. And it's like, okay, well, I need to hold on to my money. I need to be like frugal, so there's le even less spending, and it kind of just is going to keep spiraling. And then I would assume that the proposed solution would probably be, okay, well, let's print more money or let's inject more capital into the economy somehow. That which is going to make things worse. We can talk about hyperinflation, and I guess we're almost talking about it in not necessarily that it's meant in this way, but it's like often talked about like in a vacuum, where it's like, okay, this is what happened. They went to a fractional reserve system or whatever, but it is something that happened in the real world, and the consequences of that, if you look at the social strife in like Weimar Germany after the end of the First World War, was insane, where you had,
Yes.
different, communist movements, armed, fighting in the streets with the Fry Corps, and like lots of social strife. Like things
Yes,
got extremely bad, and I that is what I'm mostly worried about. Uh, that this will happen, whether it's in the U.S. or another Western country, if not like the whole West kind of being triggered into it at one point or another. And
the US nowadays is nowhere near in the same position that Germany was after World War One. I mean, like the
Mhm.
US didn't lose a world war, nor is it currently experiencing a revolution like Germany had. And but still, we still do see nowadays political turmoil. As you said, in Germany, at the end of the war, they had a revolution, and the Kaiser was deposed. He abdicated his throne, and instead, there was a new republic created. This is what we call the Weimar Republic, and it was led by the Social Democratic Party. And of course, it didn't go quietly. You had at first an uprising, but by the communist faction tried to take over. Later, you had an attempted putsch by the extreme right. And a few years later, you had some political assassinations. There was, for instance, in 1922, the assassination of their foreign minister, Walter Rathenau, probably because he negotiated some treaties with foreign, uh, with former enemies of Germany, but also probably also because he was a Jew.
You know what could end up being similar with the current trade situation is that they were experiencing rise in the cost of goods. Of course, there it was really dramatic. I think compared to what we might see. Um, Luckily, we can produce a lot of food here. Um,
Mhm.
Number one food exporter in the world, and so that will probably insulate us to some degree. But a lot of our like convenience items are being produced overseas right now. Um, and of course, they were printing a lot of money. And you know what's interesting is Warren Buffett has kind of been hoarding cash, and so it'll be interesting, if once he injects it in, if other investors have copied him, if they'll all decide to start buying whatever they're going to buy at that time, whatever they think is best. And we also get the double whammy of central banks around the world trying to offload their dollars. Who knows? We might experience some similarities. Hopefully, nothing like they experienced there.
But the reason they started all that money printing in Germany was because, according to the Treaty of Versailles, they were forced to pay reparations to the West, particularly to France and Belgium. And those were huge sums. I mean, like people don't appreciate what huge sums they were required to pay. All in all, they were asked to pay 132 billion gold marks. And that is the equivalent of, I calculated it, I couldn't believe it myself, 47,256 tons of gold.
Wow.
That's
Now,
insane.
yes, that's insane. Now, they didn't expect
Mhm.
it. They didn't expect them to pay it all at once. It was supposed to be paid in installments of 2 billion gold marks per year, which is about 700 tons. So just imagine that your country was required to pay 700 tons of gold per year, and that is after a brutal war, which pretty much, decimated your population and destroyed your economy.
It's unimaginably brutal. The
Oh
the
yeah.
amount the amount that they were being asked to pay back.
Now, what
Hmm.
they try to do, because the reparations, they had to pay gold. So in order to get that gold, they printed their paper currency in order to purchase, for instance, foreign currency, which was backed by gold, for instance, dollars, so they could convert them to gold and pay those reparations. So, it's not clear whether they realized what kind of an inflation it would generate within Germany. So, what's interesting, I think, in order to understand the situation back then, you really have to look at a chart of the price of gold back then, priced in paper marks. And you see that at first, after the war, the price of gold, one gold mark was traded for two paper marks. This is the latent inflation that I was talking about. The price of gold hasn't risen by much during the war, but between 1919 and excuse me, 1918 and 1919, you see the price of gold going up tenfold. And you would think that it's, this tremendous rise in the price of gold during just 10 years, 2 years, just in a span of 2 years. And people may have been under the impression at the time that the price of gold was expensive and that perhaps they should sell the gold. And this impression was reinforced by the fact that back then in the beginning of 1920, the government, as though stopped printing and raised interest rates in order to try to curb the inflation. And indeed, the price of gold fell, and it fell down to about 10 paper marks per one gold mark. So there was a time there which you could have had the impression that the price of gold was too high, it was too expensive. And the point of the exercise is to show that it can be very misleading because soon after they went back to printing, and after this correction, the price of gold rose up, and I think by the end of 1920, it already set a new high. It was 50 marks per 50 paper marks for one gold mark. So,
And it would be easy to make that mistake, especially when it dropped back down. You might feel like, oh, maybe I should have sold it 2 weeks ago before it dropped back down to 10 paper marks. And
Mhm.
then before you know it, it goes surging up again, much higher than it had been. And so, yeah, it's important to consider. It's hard to gauge these things when you're the one experiencing them.
Yeah, well, I would also like to just point out, like, if we're comparing to the United States right now, I guess, we have, like you said, we produce a lot of our own food. We have many buffers that are we're not at that point yet. Um, but I did want to point out that, like, Germany was already under the Kaiser since whatever the Reichsbank the Reichsbank like Act of 1875, where they were already on a fractional reserve system where I think it was a fixed percentage of 1/3 of the banknotes issued had to be backed in gold. So they were. It almost seems to me like World War One, and then the reparations and the workforce being decimated by the war. All of those stressors were almost like the system was almost already set up in a way where those stressors being put on it kind of like broke the system, which maybe if they weren't already on a fractional system, they would have weathered that enough where it didn't completely implode and then, lead to the rise of National Socialism in the end. And that I guess comes around to what I worry about. It's like, I don't think the United States is Germany in 1920, but like, I don't know, maybe we're Germany in like 1895 or something. Does that kind of make sense? Like something
yeah,
could happen and then, we're already on that road.
I, I see what you mean, and it's true. The United States is not in the same political situation, and perhaps trying to compare between the two is a bit of an exaggeration. And still, I think there's something in the mentality. Back then, the central bank, the German central bank, had no problem printing money. They saw that as a legitimate course of action in order to fund those reparations. And
Mm,
nowadays, we're seeing the Federal Reserve having no problem printing dollars in order to essentially fund the deficits of the federal
mhm,
government in order to stimulate the economy. And I'm not comparing, the circumstances, the political circumstances, but I am comparing the mindset, the as though
yeah.
the recklessness, the irresponsibility of the people in charge when it comes to managing the currency.
I absolutely agree with you there. Yeah, because yeah, we I guess we can get into the minutia of like the exact political positions, but yeah, the underlying um economic theory is very similar. It's basically like the same thought process where it's like, oh, this is we got to fix this. Let's print money very liberally for this, and the result seems historically to be bad. Um,
So I just want to give you a few numbers about how things develop from that point on. In
mm,
1922, the German government is having trouble paying those reparations again. So again, they continue printing. The price of gold surges to 1,800 paper marks by the end of the year. Now, just imagine it's beginning to go vertical. I mean, like
That would
from
be a
50.
nightmare.
Yeah, but that's just the beginning because the true mania, the true craziness happens in 1923. And that's, of course, associated with a few things that happened back then. In early 1923, uh, because the German government is unable to pay those reparations, so the French and Belgian soldiers, they invade the Ruhr district, which was like
mm,
the center of German industry. They produced coal and steel there, all their coal mines and steel mills were located there. So it was like their industrial heartland. And they took over it so they could extract by force what they were not receiving, willingly from the German government. And what the way the government responded, they said, okay, we're going to advocate passive resistance. So the workers at the Ruhr district, they went on strike. And the government, as though paid their salaries, and they did that, of course, through printing some more money. So this was like, you could say, the final blow to the paper mark. And then the price of gold goes absolutely, bananas. It just it goes from you see it rising to a million marks, then 10 million, then 100 million, then a billion, then 10 billion, 100 billion, and eventually it reaches all the way to 1 trillion paper marks by the end of 1923. So you have this hyperinflation taking place. It's very, very rapid. It happens within the span of 1 year. And just imagine, I mean, like, even if you sold your gold for a billion marks, yeah, you bought it at 1 mark. You sold it for a billion marks per one gold mark. You think you're under the impression that you made a killing, but in fact you lost everything because within a few months it's going to be a trillion. So you
I
already lost
absolutely.
99.9 or whatever of your money.
mhm.
It's just hard to comprehend that it could move along that quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it would be the equivalent if the gold went up to, it'd be like $38 trillion per troy ounce, US
Something
dollars in
crazy like
today's
that.
money.
Yes, yes.
It
Yes.
would be absolutely insane. The money would be obviously like worthless at that point.
Yes.
Like the Fiat. Yeah.
When
Yeah,
you
it's
see
like
such a
nothing.
thing, it's not happening because gold is more valuable. It's because the currency is collapsing. And you get these
Mm.
absurd numbers. Now, people are not equipped to even, comprehend such numbers. I mean, if you were following the price of gold in recent year here, you expected it to be somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000. Okay, it went above 2,000. Okay, 2,100, 2,200. Suddenly, we've recently reached 3,500. And it happened very rapidly. I mean, like people are scratching their heads. But what if this is just the beginning? This is the point of the exercise. Why am I bringing up this story about Weimar Germany? Because I want people to start imagining that just because the price of gold doubled or almost doubled, it doesn't mean it can't double again. It doesn't mean it can't go up tenfold. It doesn't mean it can go up 1,000-fold. It can. It certainly can if the dollar is indeed collapsing. I'm not saying that this is exactly what we're seeing right now. It hasn't happened yet, but I'm just entertaining the possibility. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it even compared to the dollar, in 1923, the exchange rate for the dollar, got to over 1 trillion marks. Um, and so in these situations, it can be hard to imagine, but what the best thing to do would be is just hold on, just dig your nails in and hold on to all of your precious metals uh, for as long as you possibly can. And, hopefully until the point that it seems like there's going to be some sort of monetary reset, that this fiat system that you're currently enduring is going to get replaced with something else.
Yes, right. And I'm going to get to the aftermath in a second. I just want to say that really in that year, in 1923, you saw that those absurd scenes like children playing with stacks of banknotes and people using stacks of banknotes in order to, feed their
Make a
ovens.
couch.
Yeah, yeah, burning them at the fireplace for heat because they were cheaper than firewood, and people, with wheelbarrows of cash in order to buy the most essential items. And for the population, such a thing is that's incredible suffering because people can lose all their savings almost overnight. And people
Mm.
have, whoever people who don't have the experience of a hyperinflation, they have difficulty imagining such a thing, that the currency which they worked so hard to acquire, all their life suddenly loses all value. So I think that's something we should be aware of because at least as far as the people in charge are behaving, they're behaving as though the currency is worthless. So why shouldn't we?
Yeah.
That's a good point.
No, exactly. And that's kind of my mindset on fiat currency. I don't I have some of it. I need to have some of it, but other than that, I keep actual commodities or other items, of real value because even if you look at between like I think what November and December of 1923, it was already crazy, but then it's like if you look at it on like a non-logarithmic graph, like the line goes like straight up. It's just insane. And then the
Even on a
social upheaval.
logarithmic chart, it goes up in a straight line.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's just an insane like the fact that it happens so quickly, and I don't think like you said, like a population can't really, most people can't really imagine like what that would look like. And the fact that people won't really, if that does happen, people won't really have the time, like the luxury if they haven't thought about it before, they kind of have to deal with it immediately because it happens in 3 weeks or whatever.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So we were talking about the aftermath, and okay, at the end of 1923, the head of the German central bank, Rudi Havenstein, he dies. Well, and lucky for, for the German government, because his replacement issues new currency. He stops the printing and he issues a new currency called the Rentenmark, which is convertible to the old currency at the rate of one Rentenmark for 1 trillion paper
Hmm.
marks. So and the currency is supposedly backed by real estates, which the government owns and leases out to people. I don't know if that's really a good way of backing a currency, but they had no goal to back the currency with. But the thing is that just by stopping the printing, just because that Rentenmark wasn't printed to the same degree, it was stable compared to the old currency. So they managed to stabilize the economy. And this is I think that's the lesson from that hyperinflation, that you can't just look at the price of gold or silver and say, oh, they're expensive, I'm going to sell some, because you never know if they're not going to get, even more expensive next month. You have to ask yourself if something fundamental has changed. If the currency was reset, and if the new currency is proving to be more stable than the old one, then perhaps you can consider converting some of your gold and silver into other tangible assets. There's this, people say that back then you could purchase an entire city block in downtown Berlin for 25 ounces of gold. And
That's amazing. So just
that's,
hang in there and you can be like a king,
yes, of course, whoever had the goal to do that and the good timing could really make a
right?
killing. But it was difficult to do. I'm not pretending otherwise. It was difficult to hold on to your gold and silver during that hyperinflation. It was difficult also to understand when it was over and when it was the best time to deploy that capital once the currency and the economy stabilized.
At the time you could deploy that capital in like on an individual level. Okay. However, once we get into the 30s and then the kind of government that comes into power, depending on who you are, that might just be taken from you and you get deported to like a death camp or whatnot. So
Yes.
that's kind of like the maybe I'm thinking about it too much, but it's like that's like my ultimate fear is this leading to uh such an upheaval in society that it allows for basically crazy things like that to happen. I think most Westerners right now are like can't really conceive because our system tends to change so slowly um, that there could be a revolution or a large political movement or whatever that just takes over and completely flips the script on everything. And that kind of economic turmoil is what kind of opens the door for that to be very easily possible.
Yes. I think about it quite often, about the connection between these events. And the way I see it is that hyperinflation and the fact that so many people got absolutely decimated. I mean, like people were completely impoverished. I'm guessing that it created such anger, such frustration, that it
Mm.
finally it looked for an outlet, and the outlet eventually was World War II. And probably without that hyperinflation, perhaps World War II would never happen.
Yeah.
It's definitely worth considering.
hmm or if it did happen, it happened in a different way for sure. Uh, yeah, it's scary to think about the banking system and the whole monetary system for the past 100 odd years. We've kind of opened Pandora's box of this fiat and heavy use of fractional reserve banking than complete fiat or whatever. And I'm not sure how we're gonna square that circle, so to speak. Um, the future looks uncertain.
Yes.
And I know that's not actually saying much, but it's I don't know.
Yes.
I thought about ways that we could like we had talked earlier about, certain states in the US making gold and silver legal tender. Like I think that's a good idea. I think that can kind of hedge against this, but the fact that fiat currency is out there, like that is the commonplace thing. How do we deal with that at this point, where inflation is the status quo, like where the money's going to keep inflating by kind of design, or we could go into like a crazy deflationary period, which would not be good either for different reasons.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just a matter of time. And I just want to repeat the point that Orrin had brought up, just because it's so powerful. They say that in 1923, an entire city block of commercial real estate in downtown Berlin could have been purchased for just 25 ounces of gold. So, this can get really out of control. Um, when you look at where our national debt is at, it's pretty scary. And of course, Doge is helping reduce the budget, but they're not going to create a surplus.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, it's like
and
it's putting a band-aid on a gunshot wound, basically.
Yes. And they're
it's a good way of,
encountering so much resistance.
yeah, it seems that a lot of people have decided to make this a political issue. And if,
Mhm.
you're on one side of the board politically, you're supposed to be against Doge, which is really unfortunate.
Mhm.
Well, you guys, thank you so much for coming on tonight and sharing your thoughts on this. You can find links to their X and YouTube channels in the description. Orrin, if somebody wanted to donate money to you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Well, there's a link in all my videos. There is a link to a PayPal account. You can donate there. Thank you.
Okay, great. You bet, absolutely. And Gigi, if someone wanted to order silver from you, what would be the best way for them to go about doing that?
The best way for them to go about doing that is typically to go to my Twitter account or X account and message me there, or you can email ggbullioncontact@yahoo.com. That's another avenue. Um, but typically I do most of that through Twitter, or you could go to my Instagram, and Brian, I could give you the link to that. I've also talked to people through there. But any of those three places, I would say the Twitter or the X account is the most used and probably the best way to start that process. And people can either get something like if they want something specific or custom. Some people pre-order, or I should be doing a pour next week.
You can see the stuff that Gigi has poured on his X feed. Please don't forget to hit the like button. Thank you so much for watching today and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thanks again, you guys, and I hope everyone who watched has a great day out there.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And yeah, everybody should subscribe. Hit that smash that subscribe button. Uh, due to the subscribe button, what hyperinflation did to Weimar Germany.